I am Madison Hayes, 40 years old, marketing director at a tech company in Portland, Oregon. I still remember the dim glow of fairy lights drifting across our backyard as I raised my champagne flute. It was my 40th birthday. 40 candles flickering on a mocha-layered cake that Claire had flown in from LA to bake. She even paid $350.00 for express shipping. My husband, Ethan, leaned in close, voice barely above a whisper. She needs to know the truth before midnight. His words sent a chill through me. I forced a laugh, blaming the autumn breeze, but my heart pounded like a drum. We were surrounded by laughter, my parents, John and Linda Turner, toasting the milestone with premium vintage rosé, Ethan's family cheering from their seats near the fire pit, clutching spiced cider mugs. Yet in that moment I felt utterly alone. The night air crackled with something unsaid. As we all counted down to blow out the candles, the power cut out without warning. Darkness swallowed the patio. A collective gasp, and then my phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number, time-stamped 11:47 p.m. Check the old voicemail I left last year. I froze. 40 years of carefully crafted certainty shattered in an instant. Even before the clock struck midnight, I grew up as the baby of the Turner family, always 2 steps behind my older sister Sophia, and forever striving to catch up. My earliest memories are of our cozy craftsman-style home in Seattle. Ivy crawling up the gray siding, wind chimes tinkling on the porch, and the scent of fresh-baked sourdough wafting from the kitchen where Mom, Dr. Linda Turner, would knead dough before her morning rounds at Children's Hospital. She earned $240,000 a year as a pediatrician. Dad, Professor John Turner, taught modern European history at the University of Washington, publishing 3 books and lecturing to packed auditoriums of 200 students each semester. By the time I was in high school, my parents had saved up $45,000, 0 cents in a college fund for Sophia and me. I watched Sophia win a $5,000 0 cents merit scholarship to Yale, and I vowed to do even better. I still remember the day she left for New Haven. Sophia, then 18, tearfully pressing a handwritten note into my palm that read, "Don't ever feel less than you are." It was the closest she'd ever come to admitting she looked up to me. When it came time for college applications, I aimed for Harvard, but ultimately accepted an offer from Stanford, where tuition plus room and board ran me $75,000, 0 cents a year. Those 4 years in Palo Alto changed me. I discovered a passion for brand storytelling, landed 3 paid internships, including a summer working with a boutique ad agency in San Francisco for $4,500, 0 cents. And graduated with a 3.95 GPA in marketing communications. After graduation, I returned to Seattle briefly, living with my parents rent-free while I job hunted, and finally landed a role at Cascade Tech, a mid-size software firm where I started at $65,000, 0 cents per year. 2 years later, a recruiter reached out with an offer I couldn't refuse. Marketing manager at Innovix, a Portland-based AI startup, at $95,000, 0 cents, plus stock options valued at $20,000, 0 cents. I moved to Portland in the summer of 2010, carrying 2 suitcases, 4 boxes of books, and a head full of dreams. In Portland, I met Claire Bennett during my first week. She'd just launched her sustainable fashion e-commerce site, EcoChic, and invited me for coffee at Stumptown on SW 3rd. We bonded over oat milk lattes and a shared obsession with millennial pink. Claire, 2 years older than me and already running her own business, lent me $2,000, 0 cents, when I decided to shift from Innovex's B2B focus to a consumer-facing rebrand. That small loan covered my rent for a month and an expensive Photoshop course that ultimately got me promoted to senior marketing specialist at $115,000, 0 cents a year. It wasn't long before I crossed paths with Ethan Hayes, my future husband, at a tech conference in San Francisco. He was there as part of the Hayes family delegation. His father, Robert Hayes, then 65, a veteran petroleum engineer with Chevron earning $180,000 annually, and his mother, Margaret Hayes, 63, a refined piano teacher who giggled when she recounted playing for presidents. I introduced myself while waiting in line for the keynote speaker, an ex-Google executive who now led a renewable energy startup. Ethan, at 37, was the VP of product for a clean energy software company, earning $130,000, 0 cents plus a 15% bonus. He joked that market fit was just another term for making my dad proud, and I laughed so hard I spilled my coffee. Our relationship blossomed over late-night brainstorming sessions about how green tech could change the world, weekend hikes in Forest Park, and Sunday brunches at mother-in-law Margaret's house in Tigard, where she'd bake almond croissants with a meticulousness that made me feel both loved and eternally in need of self-improvement. When Ethan proposed, he did so on a misty October morning at Hoyt Arboretum, soliciting my hand with a custom-engraved rose gold ring valued at $6,200, 0 cents. By our wedding in June 2014, I'd negotiated a base salary of $145,000, 0 cents, as Director of Marketing at Innovix, and exercised stock options worth an additional $35,000, 0 cents. Ethan, at 39, had just been promoted to Chief Product Officer, his total compensation package approaching $180,000, 0 cents a year plus equity. We bought our first home together, a craftsman bungalow in Portland's Richmond neighborhood, for $550,000, 0 cents, taking out a 30-year mortgage at 3.75%. The closing costs and down payment alone drained $110,000, 0 cents from our savings, but we celebrated by hosting a backyard barbecue that drew 70 guests and cost us about $1,800, 0 cents in food, rentals, and craft beer. Despite our busy careers, we cultivated rituals that grounded us. Every Thursday we'd cook together, testing one recipe from Claire's newly published cookbook, Eco Eats, and sharing my favorite Trader Joe's wine, a $12, 0 cents red Zinfandel. On weekend mornings we attended spin classes at Flywheel, monthly membership, $150, 0 cents, then walked our Labrador mix buddy through Laurelhurst Park. We babysat for my parents' grandchildren, Sophia's twins Emma and Jack, born in 2017, gladly trading jaunts to Powell's Books for pizza nights and bedtime stories. I taught Emma how to spot hidden doorways in fairy tale books, while Jack learned to identify every bridge that spanned the Willamette River. At family gatherings, the Turners and Hayeses blended seamlessly, or so it seemed. My sister Sophia, now a law professor at Georgetown earning $125,000, 0 cents, would fly in once a year, often bringing her husband, Marcus, and their 4-year-old twins. My mother and Margaret would exchange tips on pediatric vitamins while my dad and Robert debated geopolitics over single malt scotch. It felt idyllic, like a well-choreographed family portrait. Every smile, every embrace meticulously placed. Yet beneath the surface, subtle pressures lurked. My parents often reminded me how I'd been the golden child for my grades, and sometimes I sensed disappointment when I chose marketing over pursuing a PhD in history. With the Hayes family, Margaret would casually ask, "When are we going to hear some pitter-patter of little feet at every gathering?" Her voice soft but insistent, as though my ticking biological clock were a communal concern. Ethan and I discussed kids, but neither of us felt ready. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt when I saw her searching look. And then there was the question of money. In 2018, when Innovix raised its Series B of $15 million, 0 cents, my stock options damn near doubled in value. Yet when I broached the idea of using some of the gains to buy a vacation home, perhaps a small chalet in Hood River, my parents advised caution, citing market volatility, while Claire urged me to seize the moment. At the same time, Ethan's father hinted that family resources could be pooled for a bigger Hayes compound down in Texas. Suddenly our finances felt like a tightrope, with every decision scrutinized by both sets of parents. Still, most days were marked by genuine joy. I remember crisp January evenings when Ethan and I would sit on our porch, bundled in Pendleton blankets, sipping hot toddies after Buddy's evening walk. He'd recount wild product team victories, like landing a Fortune 500 client worth $250,000, 0 cents in annual recurring revenue, while I shared my latest campaign metrics, showing a 23% uptick in user engagement. We clinked our mugs and celebrated every small win, knowing that together we were building something far bigger than ourselves. My strongest bond, though, was with Claire. When I surprised everyone by accepting a promotion that required me to relocate to Portland's satellite office in Bend, an 80-mile drive each way. Claire didn't hesitate to offer me a room in her downtown loft, rent-free for 6 weeks, until I found my own place. She made care packages of kale chips and olive oils, cheering me on as I commuted through the Cascade foothills. When I finally moved into my Richmond bungalow, Claire threw me a housewarming debrief party, complete with a $500 0 cents gift card to IKEA for new throw pillows. In those early nights in my new home, curling up on my second-hand West Elm sofa with a stack of brand guidelines and a cup of Twinings Earl Grey, I felt the warmth of every shared memory. The late-night study sessions in Palo Alto, the laughter-filled anniversaries, the impromptu road trips up the Oregon coast. Each moment stitched together a tapestry of love, trust, and unwavering support. Looking back now, I realize those years laid the foundation for everything that followed. The confidence to challenge my family's expectations, the resilience to stand up for what I believed in, and the compassion to forgive, and sometimes even to forget. More importantly, they taught me that home wasn't just a mortgage address or a stock portfolio. It was the people who believed in me, no matter how many twists and turns life threw our way. And though I savored every page of that warm past, I also sensed that beneath its comfortable chapters, a storm was gathering, one that would soon test the strength of every bond I'd built. The morning after my birthday, our Richmond bungalow felt eerily quiet. I padded into the kitchen in my pajamas, poured a cup of Stumptown dark roast, a 12-ounce bag had cost me $4.25 at the co-op, and glanced at my phone. That mysterious 11:47 p.m. text, "Check the old voicemail I left last year," still felt like a punch to the gut. With a tremor in my thumb, I tapped open the voicemail tab and saw a single unheard message from Ethan, dated March 15, 2024. I hit play and listened to his voice again, low and urgent. He'd wired $50,000, 0 cents, to a boutique firm called Starlight Consulting at my request. According to him, it was critical for the next board meeting, and I was not to tell anyone. Shock tightened my chest. I had no memory of authorizing a 5-figure transfer, nor did I recall any board meeting urgencies. My next move was to log into our joint checking account. The balance seemed normal, just over $28,000, until I scrolled back to mid-March. There it was, an ACH debit of $50,000, 0 cents to Starlight, labeled Strategic Planning. My stomach knotted. I stared at the line item as if it might dissolve before my eyes. I called Claire immediately. She answered bleary-eyed, teasing me about my hangover, but when I asked about Starlight Consulting, her tone shifted. It turned out Ethan had indeed told her about his routing error last spring, how he'd accidentally given my personal bank details to the finance team when initiating the corporate wire. He'd even asked Monica Alvarez, Innovic's CFO, to reverse the charge, or so he'd said. Claire had no idea whether that reversal ever happened. Fueled by adrenaline, I dove into my work inbox and searched for Starlight. Within minutes, I unearthed a forwarded thread from March 20, 2024. Ethan's request that the $50,000 0 cents be expensed under Hayes Marketing, followed by Monica's curt confirmation that the funds were reclassified, not reversed. There was no mention of refunding my account, and no apology for using it in the first place. I felt a surge of betrayal. This wasn't a simple mix-up. It was a deliberate decision to mask a company payment through my personal finances. That night, I confronted Ethan at our favorite Uptown Grind cafe. I slid a printed bank statement across the table and recounted what I'd discovered. He admitted to choosing my account for speed and promised to repay me once the board signed off. But his apology rang hollow. Back home, my mind raced with questions. Why hadn't Innovix clawed the money back? Why bury a corporate expense in my name? A new voicemail blinked on my screen. This one from Claire, left 2 days ago, urging me to check my leather-bound journal. Flipping to page 47, I found bullet points I'd scribbled in the chaos of last spring. Wire $50, 0 cents K. Monica on frantic call. Ethan said all covered. I'd remembered the panic but somehow forgotten the details. That evening, Buddy curled at my feet as I mulled over the revelation. I realized the secrecy extended beyond the bank wire. Ethan had met Monica for a private dinner at the Bent Brick Speakeasy on March 13 with no invite for me and no notes for Claire. Worse still, a LinkedIn recommendation from a board member praised Monica stealth and precision in handling high-stakes finances, skills I didn't want tied to my name or bank account. By week's end, I sat down with my sister Sophia over salads at Magnolia Bistro. Our bill came to $69.00. Fresh from her divorce, Sophia had honed a ruthless legal eye. After I laid out the timeline, she didn't mince words. Wiring corporate funds through my personal account without clear consent could expose me to fraud allegations. I needed counsel immediately. That night, I called our family lawyer, Rebecca Chen, and booked a consultation at $300 0 cents per hour. As I arranged the appointment, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The warm past I'd cherished, our idyllic marriage, the shared dreams, the late-night coffee runs, had developed deep undercurrents of mistrust. Yet amid the shock and the hurt, the lessons I'd learned as a marketer and as a daughter kicked in. Dig deep. Ask tough questions. Insist on transparency. I drafted a terse email to Ethan, demanding full disclosure of every conversation, every transaction, every hidden meeting. My heart pounded, but I hit send without hesitation. That email marked the true beginning of the storm. I could already see the gathering clouds, and I was determined to weather them on my own terms. I arranged to meet Ethan that Friday morning at 9:00 a.m. at the Starbucks on NW 23rd and Lovejoy. My usual caramel macchiato there ran about $4.75, but the sting of betrayal made every sip taste like ash. The cafe was buzzing with commuters tapping away on MacBooks and scrolling through emails, oblivious to the storm I was about to unleash. When Ethan slid into the booth across from me, he looked tired but harmless in his usual navy blazer and pressed chinos. I set my phone on the table, displaying the voicemail transcript and a screenshot of our bank statement showing the $50,000 0 cents ACH debit from March 14, 2024. "Explain this," I said, voice low but steady, "and don't lie to me." Ethan's jaw clenched. He kept his eyes down as he fumbled for words. "Matt, I thought I was protecting you. It was a corporate loan, not personal. I planned to route it back through Innovix once the board approved the merger." "Protecting me?" I echoed, leaning in so no one could overhear. "You used my personal account to hide company funds. That's fraud, Ethan. Plain and simple." He swallowed and ran a hand through his hair. "I panicked when the deal stalled. They needed proof of commitment. $50,000 0 cents was the bare minimum. I gave them what they wanted, and I told Monica to expense it under my department. It made sense at the time. I pulled out my phone again and tapped to play a video clip I'd recorded from a family gathering last month. The clip showed my mother-in-law, Margaret Hayes, laughing over coffee with her old business partner Richard Caldwell at the Hayes family estate in Tigard. Her voice was warm until Richard slid a manila envelope across the table. Then she looked down at the bulging stack of bills. $20,000 0 cents in crisp 20s. She slipped the envelope into her designer handbag, then met my mother's gaze and said, "This will keep the board friendly." Ethan's face blanched. "Maggie, Mom, did you have to do that?" Margaret's eyes glittered with defiance in the grainy recording. "Business is business, dear," she'd answered, smoothing her cashmere sweater. "You know that." My hands trembled as I confronted them both, my world tilting. "So you conspired to launder corporate funds through my account, while my own mother-in-law pocketed a bribe? How deep does this go?" Ethan glanced around, voice dropping. "It wasn't supposed to involve you. I never wanted you to be dragged into—" "Too late," I cut him off. "You already did." I reached for my laptop bag, pulled out a printed email chain between Margaret and Richard dated February 2, 2024, confirming the $20,000 0 cents transfer under the subject line, "Family Partnership Bonus." My sister Sophia had dug it up for me. I slid it across the table. Margaret's knuckles turned white as she nodded at the printout. Then came the final blow. My phone rang. The caller ID read Rebecca Chen S., our family lawyer. "Madison, I just reviewed the wire transfer documentation you emailed me. If Inovix and the Hayes family don't correct this immediately, I'll have to file a formal complaint with the Oregon Department of Justice and notify the SEC. They take undisclosed corporate transfers and bribery very seriously." Silence filled the booth. Other patrons glanced our way. I caught a barista cast a curious look over the counter. Ethan closed his eyes, and Margaret quietly excused herself, slipping out the side door. The betrayal felt seismic, as if every foundation I'd built, my marriage, my career, my sense of family, had shattered in one swift motion. When Ethan finally spoke again, his voice was small. "I'm sorry, Mads, I thought I was doing the right thing." "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, gathering my papers. The latte I'd barely touched had gone cold. "You've dragged my name through this mess and now you expect forgiveness?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "I need time to think," I told him, standing. My legs felt wobbly, but I held my head high. As I walked out into the crisp morning air, I felt the weight of their deception press down on me, but also a fierce resolve to reclaim my integrity and chart a new course, no matter how painful the fallout. I slammed the front door behind me and sank to the entryway floor, my loafers discarded beside me as the weight of betrayal pinched my lungs. My heart pounded in my ears. The $50,000 0 cents siphoned through my account, my mother-in-law's $20,000 0 cents envelope, the looming threat of legal action. And I couldn't stop the tears. I fumbled for my phone and called Claire, her familiar laugh replaced by a soft urgency as she promised to be here in minutes. When she arrived, I was surrounded by printed emails and bank statements, buddies sniffing at my trembling hands. Claire didn't try to talk me out of my panic. She simply sat beside me, wrapped me in a hug, and together we ordered pad thai and tom yum soup, each bite tasteless, but a reminder I still needed strength. As we ate, Claire FaceTimed Sophia, whose calm voice guided me through scanning every document into Evernote, filing folder after folder until the chaos became a searchable timeline. Later, curled on the bedroom floor with my leather-bound journal in hand, I reread a June 10, 2025 entry. my own warning about an Innovix dinner, and realized my gut had been right all along. When Mom arrived with mint tea at 7:15 p.m., her steady insistence that I demand a formal letter from Innovix to clear my name gave me the clarity I'd been missing. I drafted that email to Monica Alvarez before bedtime, then spotted a confirmation for my 10 a.m. call with our lawyer, Rebecca Chen. As I drifted off, Buddy curled at my feet. I felt the raw ache in my chest transform into something fiercer, a resolve to protect my integrity and face whatever came next. The next morning, I rose before sunrise, the rhythmic tick of my bedside clock reading 5:45 a.m. MF. My head throbbed slightly, residual from yesterday's emotional descent, but I felt a flicker of determination propelling me into action. I brewed a fresh pot of Stumptown Ethiopia single organ. The 12-ounce bag cost me $16.50, pouring 2 heaping scoops into my French press and waiting the customary 4 minutes. As the coffee steeped, I spread yesterday's documents across the kitchen island, printouts of my correspondence with Monica Alvarez, Ethan's evasive texts, and the timeline Sophia and Claire had helped me assemble in Evernote. The organized chaos looked intimidating, but the very act of seeing everything laid out gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in days. By 7:00 a.m. I was dressed in comfortable yet sharp attire, dark skinny jeans, a crisp white blouse and my favorite navy blazer. I slipped on ankle boots and tucked my moleskin journal into my tote, alongside a USB drive containing encrypted copies of every file. At 7:15 a.m., I called Rebecca Chen to confirm our appointment. She would meet me at her downtown office at 10:00. Her voice was reassuring, reminding me of her $300 0 per hour retainer and promising to review my case with an eye toward minimizing my liability. Hanging up, I texted Claire, who responded instantly. Coffee before the storm, 8:00. I am uptown grind, I'll buy. Claire arrived at precisely 8:00 a.m., sliding into the booth with a caramel pecan latte, $5.25, and a determined smile. Time for Plan B, she said, clicking open her laptop to a mind-mapping template she'd preloaded. We mapped out 3 parallel tracks: legal counsel, board engagement, and personal boundaries. Under legal counsel, we listed draft demand letter and review SEC rules on undisclosed transactions. Under board engagement, prepare slide deck and schedule emergency board meeting. Under personal boundaries, limit contact with family until terms clear and set up separate financial account. As Claire sipped her latte, she added micro twists to our plan. Find Christmas letter from Margaret Hayes, could reveal past patterns, and check for any background photos of their family gatherings online. Our first stop after coffee was my home office, where I scanned and encrypted the Christmas letter Claire had dug out from my mother-in-law's old stationery box. Dated December 20, 2023, it contained Margaret's gracious holiday wishes, followed by a P.S., let's revisit our little financial arrangement come January. The subtext was unmistakable. This wasn't a one-off bribe but part of a recurring scheme. I saved the scan as Xmas 2023_Hayes_letter PU on the USB drive. At 10:00 a.m. sharp, I strode into Rebecca Chen's warmly decorated office. The walls were lined with books on corporate law and framed client success stories. Rebecca greeted me with a firm handshake, then motioned me to the conference table. Over steaming mint tea, which she insisted was excellent for stress relief, we reviewed the evidence. Rebecca pointed out that wiring corporate funds through my personal account could expose me to allegations of aiding and abetting financial misconduct. We need your demand letter to Innovix's board and a simultaneous cease and desist to the Hayes family, she advised, to establish clear separation between you and their actions. She drafted a skeleton of the letter on her laptop, charging me for 2 hours of her time, total fee $600 0. Exiting Rebecca's office at noon, I felt colder, more resolute. I took a brisk walk along the waterfront, the Willamette River glinting beneath the midday sun, and sent the draft demand letter to Monica Alvarez and Innovict's general counsel. In the email I attached scanned exhibits, the ACH debit record, the Christmas letter, and my correspondence requesting reversal. I demanded a written acknowledgement of my non-liability by end of business the next day. Within minutes, Monica replied, "We are reviewing your documents and will respond ASAP." That afternoon, Claire and I convened at my dining table for what we jokingly called war room operations. We assembled snacks, kettle chips, $3.75, La Croix sparkling water, and pulled up a shared Google Slides deck. On slide 1, we titled it Evidence and Issues. On slide 2, desired board outcomes, including a formal apology, reversal of the March 14 debit, and a commitment to transparent future dealings. Slide 3, family protocol. A proposal to establish a legally binding family transparency pact with clear financial and communication boundaries. By 4:30 p.m., the deck was in near final form. Late afternoon brought another micro twist. I discovered on Instagram a tagged photo from a Hayes family picnic on May 5, 2025. In the background, barely visible, was Ethan standing beside Monica Alvarez, both smiling and holding copies of the Innovic's financial statement. The JPEG's metadata showed it was taken just 2 days after the board meeting to reclassify the $50,000 0-cent payment. I saved the image and added it as Exhibit C in the slides, with a note, unscheduled follow-up meeting, no invite to me. Seeing it there underscored the depth of the exclusion I'd faced. By 6:00 p.m., exhausted but energized by progress, Claire and I celebrated with takeout sushi, California rolls, $14.00, and 2 cans of Spindrift, $3.00 each. We clinked our miso soup spoons in a small cheers and shared a genuine laugh. "To transparency," I said, "and to fightin' back." As I packed up my laptop, I realized the vulnerability and pain I'd felt were giving way to a newfound purpose. That evening, I drafted a personal boundary email to my parents. "Mom, Dad, I'm initiating a legal process with Innovix and will be adjusting my personal and professional availability over the next week. I appreciate your support but ask that you withhold commentary until this matter is resolved." I hesitated, finger hovering over send, then clicked. The message soared out at 8:17 p.m. and I felt my chest expand with relief. Before bed, I revisited my moleskin journal and wrote a single line. "Today I reclaimed my agency." As I closed the cover, Buddy jumped onto the bed, nuzzling my arm. I stroked his fur and realized I no longer felt like a victim, just a strategist poised to turn this crisis into a catalyst for justice. The recovery spark had ignited. The fight ahead would be long, but I was ready. I scheduled the Emergency Family and Corporate Summit for Tuesday, July 8 at 4:00 p.m. In the Turner family dining room, our third-floor space that once hosted holiday feasts for 20, now repurposed for conflict resolution. I arrived at 3:45 p.m., dressed in a charcoal sheath dress and matching blazer, a splurge from Banana Republic at $129.00, carrying my trusty MacBook Pro, loaded with the Google Slides deck Claire and I had perfected. The long oak table was strewn with nameplates: Madison Hayes, Ethan Hayes, John Turner, Linda Turner, Robert Hayes, and neatly bound binders of exhibits labeled A through D. By 4:05 p.m., the room was full. My parents, Ethan's parents, my sister Sophia, fresh from Georgetown draped in academic regalia that still bore a hint of cap and gown, board member Gregory Lane, joining via Zoom from New York, and Innovix's general counsel, Michelle Tran, in a navy pantsuit looking every bit the seasoned litigator. Claire arrived just in time, setting up on my left with an encouraging nod. The air felt taut, a mix of anticipation and lingering resentment. I clicked Start Presentation and exhaled. On slide 1, titled Overview and Objectives, I outlined 3 goals. 1. Secure formal reversal of the March 14, 2024 debit. 2. Obtain a written apology from Innovix and the Hayes family. 3. Establish a family transparency pact with legally binding communication and financial protocols. I kept my voice steady, imagining I was pitching $1 million campaign rather than exposing a family scandal. On slide 2, Exhibit A, ACH transaction record. I displayed the $50,000 0-cent debit logged to my joint account. I walked them through the timeline. March 13, dinner at the Bent Brick. March 14, wire. March 20, reclassification email. June 10, personal journal note. Each date drew murmurs. Monica Alvarez, sitting beside Michelle Tran, avoided eye contact. Slide 3, Exhibit B, Christmas 2023, letter, revealed Margaret's holiday PS. Let's revisit our little financial arrangement come January. I paused to let the words sink in. My mother, Dr. Linda Turner, pressed her lips together. My father, John, shifted uncomfortably. Even Robert Hayes, patriarch of the Hayes oil dynasty, looked cornered. As murmurs grew, I clicked to slide 4, Exhibit C. Picnic photo, May 5, 2025, zooming in on the Instagram image of Ethan and Monica holding financial statements behind my back. Gregory Lane, my slide's remote moderator, spoke up via Zoom. That unscheduled follow-up meeting was not on the board calendar. We need an explanation. His voice carried authority, and it was the first real pressure Innovix had faced publicly. On slide 5, Exhibit D, bindings of legal correspondence, I summarized Rebecca Chen's advice. Wiring corporate funds through a personal account without express written consent violates Oregon Revised Statutes SS chapters on corporate fraud and could trigger an SEC inquiry. Michelle Tran cleared her throat. Miss Hayes, she began, Innovix takes these allegations seriously. We're prepared to reverse the $50,000 0-cents by COBE tomorrow and issue a formal apology contingent on the Hayes family's cooperation. I allowed a small smile. My first win. Then I pivoted to slide 6, Family Transparency Pact draft, outlining clear rules. All related party transactions over $5,000, 0 cents require dual signatures. Any board or finance meeting involving Hayes family interests must include my participation or written notice. Annual third-party audit at $3,000, 0 cents to ensure compliance. My mother-in-law's face hardened. She leaned forward. Are you suggesting I can't manage my own investments? I nodded. This isn't about micromanaging. It's about fairness and protecting everyone's interests, including yours. My voice was firm. We've seen how ambiguity breeds misconduct. A knock sounded at the door. Ethan's younger cousin, Laura Hayes, aged 28, poked her head in. I thought you might need an ally, she said, sliding in a sealed envelope marked confidential family testimony. She looked at Margaret and said quietly, I couldn't stay silent. My jaw dropped as she handed me several pages describing past instances when Margaret had requested off-book payments. I've lived with this for years, Laura whispered. It's time someone spoke. The room went silent. Even Margaret couldn't find words. Laura's micro-twist, an unexpected witness, shifted the balance irreversibly. Gregory Lane tapped his pen. This testimony, combined with Ms. Hayes' evidence, warrants immediate action. I move that Innovix not only reverse the $50,000 0 cents, but also commission an independent internal review at a cost of $10,000 0 cents, split evenly between corporate and family funds. His motion passed with nods from Michelle Tran and my parents. Ethan at last spoke. Mads, I'm sorry. I see now how badly I misjudged. His apology sounded genuine, and for a moment I felt the old compassion flicker, but I held firm. I appreciate that, Ethan, but this is bigger than us. Margaret's shoulders slumped. I underestimated how much pain I caused. I'm willing to sign the pact, she said softly, her Texas drawl testing each word. The tension cracked, giving way to relief so sweet it made my eyes water. We spent the next hour refining the transparency pact, adding bulletproof clauses, mandatory quarterly updates, an annual family retreat with a neutral mediator, $5,000 0 cents budgeted, and zero tolerance for undisclosed side agreements. Claire chimed in with suggested phrasing to keep the tone collaborative yet enforceable. Sophia took notes like a hawk, later volunteering to draft the final document pro bono. As the meeting wrapped at 6:30 p.m., Monica Alvarez handed me a crisp letter of apology on Innovic's letterhead, signed by CEO Carla Morales, and a separate letter from Margaret expressing regret. I slid both into my binder, feeling a weight lift. We adjourned to the backyard, turning the long dining table into a casual post-summit barbecue. My father lit the grill. Robert Hayes offered a toast with locally brewed craft beers, $8 0 cents a bottle. To new beginnings, he said. Laughter returned hesitantly at first, then more freely as we ate cedar plank salmon, grilled asparagus and quinoa salad, catered from a local farm-table service at $450 0 cents for 50 guests. In a moment I'll never forget, Margaret approached me, her eyes brimming. She handed me a small gift box. Inside, a silver locket engraved with my initials and the word trust. I hope you'll wear this, she whispered, and know I mean to earn back your faith. I clasped her hand. Thank you, I said quietly, feeling genuine warmth for the first time since the crisis began. Ethan slipped his arm around me, planting a tentative kiss on my temple. Claire raised her glass, sparkling water for her, rose for me, and cheered. To tough conversations and real change. That evening, as the sun set over Seattle's skyline visible through the Turner dining room windows, I marveled at how the narrative had flipped. What began as my worst nightmare had become an opportunity to redefine our family's values. By turning the tables, presenting the evidence, enlisting unexpected allies, and insisting on concrete safeguards, I'd transformed betrayal into accountability. The path ahead would require vigilance, but for the first time in weeks, I slept without the knot of fear in my chest. I'd reclaimed my story, and in doing so written a new chapter for us all. I didn't expect the real breakthrough to come from Grandma Evelyn's attic, but there I was on a Saturday afternoon, sorting through dusty trunks while Claire supervised from the ladder. Grandma Evelyn Turner, my mother's mother, had lived to 98, passing away peacefully last year in her Seattle home, leaving behind a lifetime of letters, photographs, and surprising secrets. As I lifted a faded brown leather suitcase stamped E. Turner, 1948, an envelope tumbled out addressed to me in her looping script, "For Madison, when you need courage." Inside, I found a typed memoir, 70 pages in a spiral binder, detailing Grandma Evelyn's early years as one of the first female flight engineers for Northwest Airlines. She wrote about flying DC-4 propeller planes on transcontinental routes for $300 0 cents a month in 1950, navigating storms over the Rockies with nothing but analog gauges and sheer determination. She described nights spent in makeshift lounges at LAX listening to jazz records on a pay-per-gay jukebox, 15 cents per song, and the prejudice she faced from male colleagues who doubted a woman could handle heavy metal in the sky. One passage, dated June 15, 1953, stood out. Grandma Evelyn recounted a near-disastrous engine failure over Montana when she jettisoned non-essential cargo, bricks stored for a Minneapolis charter, to lighten the load. She noted in her memoir that those hundreds of pounds of bricks cost the company $52 0 cents each in replacement fees. Yet her split-second decision saved all 12 passengers on board. In life, she wrote, you must be willing to throw away what weighs you down, even if it costs you the bricks you built your house with. Tears welled in my eyes as I read those words. The metaphor resonated. I jettisoned trust, discarded assumptions, and rebuilt my life on truth instead of convenience. But the real twist came when I reached the back of the binder, a single page labeled PPS, where Grandma Evelyn revealed that she'd taken out a life insurance policy in 1962, designating me as the beneficiary. The policy had grown over 63 years, with compound interest at 4.5% annually. The current value was $78,423.90 and would be paid out to me tax-free upon submission of the claim. My breath caught. Grandma Evelyn's foresight meant I could cover the costs of the independent audit Innovix was funding, pay Sophia's pro bono drafting fees, and contribute a matching $3,000 to the Family Transparency PAC's annual audit fund, without dipping into our emergency savings. It was more than money. It was a powerful affirmation that courage and clarity, like compound interest, accumulate and yield dividends over time. That evening, Claire and I toasted the discovery with Twining's Earl Grey and a slice of lemon pound cake, Grandma's recipe, adapted with gluten-free flour and costing $12.00 for the ingredients. We laughed at how fitting it was that Grandma's final gift would underwrite our fight for integrity. As I mailed the claim form with the required $25.00 processing fee, I felt her presence beside me, her ingenuity guiding each step. Grandma Evelyn's story became a bonus insight woven into our journey. True leadership often comes from behind the scenes, from the wings rather than the cockpit, and the smallest acts of foresight can become lifelines decades later. In that moment, I realized that my recovery wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about honoring a legacy of quiet bravery and repaying it by building a new foundation of trust for generations to come. That Monday, I opened my inbox to find a terse HR memo announcing that Margaret Hayes had been immediately relieved of her duties on the Innovix Advisory Board for her role in undisclosed payments. A vindication I received with equal parts relief and sorrow. Later that afternoon, my father-in-law called, his voice heavy. The board's decision was unanimous and irrevocable, leaving Margaret devastated, he said. When her own brief group text landed in my phone announcing her resignation from all corporate affiliations and enrollment in a 12-week business ethics workshop, I felt the gravity of her fall. The story quickly spilled into local business blogs with headlines like Hayes Matriarch Ousted and Scandal Rocks Innovix. But I refused to let the public chatter distract me. That evening, Ethan and I hosted a small backyard gathering, just Claire, Sophia, 2 neighbors, and our Labrador buddy, to reclaim the warmth that had been so brutally upended. Mid-conversation, I received an email from Innovix's general counsel confirming the external audit's launch, half funded by the Hayes Restitution Fund and promising full transparency by September 15. 3 weeks later, under the Family Transparency Pact, we convened a town hall of 20 kin in the Portland Women's Club's sunlit conference room. I presented the audit's preliminary findings, no further hidden payments, clear recommendations, and a roadmap for ethical governance, while Margaret, seated front and center, absorbed every word. When it was her turn, her trembling apology and pledge to rebuild trust drew a hush across the room before it erupted into heartfelt applause. Later, as she pressed the fully signed pact into my hands and hugged me with genuine remorse, I realized her true downfall was not merely public disgrace, but the humbling path she'd chosen toward redemption. Driving home under a full moon that night, I felt the catharsis of justice met by forgiveness, closing one tumultuous chapter and opening another defined by accountability and hope. That Sunday morning, sunlight streamed through the living room windows, casting a warm glow over the hand-painted plaque my mother and I had hung above the fireplace the night before. Trust, compassion, honesty. As I sipped my mint-infused lemonade on the couch, I reflected on how far we'd come since that fateful voicemail. The house felt different now, lighter, more open, just like our hearts. Today marked the 1-week anniversary of the Family Transparency Pact signing, and I'd invited everyone back for a casual potluck brunch to celebrate, not just the end of a crisis, but the beginning of a new chapter. By 10:30 a.m. the dining table was groaning under the weight of dishes. Claire's signature avocado quinoa salad with cherry tomatoes and feta, Sophia's cinnamon apple skillet bread served warm with maple butter, my dad's smoked brisket omelets, a nod to his weekend smoker experiments, and Mom's lavender honey scones folded with dried berries, each recipe imbued with comfort and collaboration. Ethan carried in a bouquet of wildflowers from the local farmer's market, and Margaret arrived with a framed copy of our first transparency report, a tangible symbol of accountability that she insisted on displaying prominently above her desk. Our neighbors, the Parkers and the Johnsons, stopped by, with fresh-baked banana bread and their cheerful encouragement, reminding me that community is the bedrock upon which families thrive. As we gathered around the table, I felt a surge of gratitude. My sister raised her glass of sparkling elderflower tonic and offered a toast to Madison, whose courage reminded us that integrity isn't always easy, but it's always worth fighting for. Laughter and nods rippled through the room, and I let myself savor the moment, knowing that these smiles were earned through honesty as much as celebration. After brunch, we moved to the backyard, where Ethan unveiled his surprise, a wooden Adirondack rocking chair he'd refurbished himself, painted in our family colors with a brass plaque reading Lake Tahoe Fall 2025. Our next adventure. The plan, hatched during our reconciliation barbecue, was to rent a lakeside cabin for a long weekend as a final bonding ritual, celebrating our renewed unity against the backdrop of shimmering water and mountain pines. I felt a thrill at the thought of golden-leafed aspen groves and crisp mountain air, a fitting next step in our journey of healing. Later, as the afternoon waned, I led everyone in a short gratitude circle, echoing the ritual we'd first tried at the Transparency Pact signing. Each person spoke one word that captured how they felt: relief, hope, belonging, renewal. When it came to Margaret, her voice quivered as she said, redemption. I reached out and clasped her hand, feeling the genuine warmth beneath her apology, and realized that true resolution isn't merely the absence of conflict but the presence of empathy. That evening, after the guests drifted away and the last dishes were stowed, I curled up on the sofa with Buddy at my feet and opened my leather-bound journal. I wrote the final entry of this chapter. Today, we turned scars into stories of strength. We proved that transparency isn't just a policy, it's a promise we make to each other every day. I paused, pen hovering, and added a micro twist that only I would know. I'd secretly arranged for Grandma Evelyn's life insurance funds to be donated to a local scholarship in her name, ensuring that her legacy of courage would empower other young women in STEM. A private tribute woven into our public triumph. As dusk settled, I glanced at the plaque above the fireplace, its 3 words shining softly in the lamplight, and felt a deep sense of peace. The lessons were clear: that trust must be nurtured through consistent truth-telling, that compassion transforms accountability from a burden into a bridge, and that honesty, even when it stings, ultimately frees us from the weight of hidden debts. I closed my journal with a satisfied sigh, knowing my story had come full circle, from the fear-fueled voicemail to this hopeful resolution, and that the values we'd forged here would guide us through whatever storms lay ahead. In the hush of the evening, as Buddy's gentle snore echoed in the next room, I felt ready to embrace tomorrow, confident that our family's strongest ties were those we chose to strengthen every single day.